Jeff was supposed to have been home 2 weeks ago, in time for my birthday. 75. No flowers this year. But we both thought it would be a quick visit. He's been gone over a month. I didn't really feel like traveling these days anyway, especially not with this pandemic. Never liked airports or airplanes at the best of times. Oh, they treat me like a bloody criminal, the way they pat me up and down, just because I have an artificial hip. People look at you like you are one too. A criminal. Well, don't get me wrong, if the destination's right, I'll go. I mean, usually we spend much of the winter in Cuba. We've been going there for years. Well, it's a second home, really. But we couldn't head south this winter. And I sure didn't want to go out west to see old Pruneface, his sister. And Jeff didn't want me to go anyway. I'd just get in the way. Oh, he'll be home this afternoon. Better late than never. I got up early. Lots to do. Oh, when you're alone a lot, you kind of let things slip. Like my beard got long, my hair needed a trim. Things pile up. Things to do, like dusting. Patricia hasn't been coming to clean since the pandemic. And laundry, I think I've been wearing this same shirt for 2 weeks. Gardening. At least Jeff can cut the lawn when he gets home. Dandelions are looking pretty good though. And grocery shopping. It's no fun anymore, those damn masks. My niece says I'm a person at risk. She means I'm old. She says I shouldn't be going out so much. But she used to come around a lot. She doesn't anymore. She's a person at risk too. She works in a hospital, a social worker, so she has to be careful. But she calls a lot. Sometimes I don't answer the phone. But she stopped by the other day. Scared the bejesus out of me. I didn't hear her come in. I should never have given her that key. All of a sudden this voice behind me says, who are you talking to? There she was, in a mask, standing in the doorway behind me. Couldn't see the expression on her face, but her voice pretty much said it all. She thinks I'm going daft, I know. What's wrong with talking to yourself anyway? I mean, it's good company, especially when you're alone, usually agreeable. It's good to hear your own voice from time to time. And they say the best company is one's company. One's own company. Never really took to Jeff, my niece. Don't think he paid enough attention to her, and she lived with us when she was a teenager for 5 years. Jeff says they were 5 of the longest years of his life. He found her to be high maintenance, spoiled, precocious, and argumentative. But I guess she was just being a teenager. She thought she knew everything. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, I am not young enough to know everything. Something like that anyway. Fortunately, Jeff was away a lot with work back then. Sometimes I think he stayed away longer than he had to. I miss him though. I mean, he can't be together almost 50 years and not miss him. Our anniversary's coming up. A big one. I hope he doesn't forget. I mean, sometimes he does. But this one's special. I never thought I'd live long enough to see the day. He doesn't call much. I mean, he's never been a telephone talker. And I forgot to give him my new email address before he left. Slipped my mind. A lot is slipping there these days. It isn't easy with the time zones, 4 hours difference. When he gets in at night, I'm usually in bed asleep. He says he doesn't want to waken me. He's stressed. He spends the day at the hospital. Oh, they let him in when his test came back negative, so he was lucky, I guess. Well, his sister was anyway. Well, then she had that turn for the worse. As if she ever had a turn for the better. He had to cancel his last flight home. She doesn't like me, his sister, but then she's religious in a rigid, judgmental sort of way. She's always talking about the saints and the angels. One day she told me that even I, yes, she said even I, had an angel looking after me. Bunch of rubbish, if you ask me. Well, I told her I already had a fairy looking after me and I didn't need any angels. She gave me one of those looks, the kind she gave me so often, especially when she thought I wasn't looking. Disapproving. Oh, she's a wiry thing. Takes more pills than a traveling rock band. And all those fad diets, it's no wonder she's sick so much of the time. One day she told Jeff I was trying to kill her. Now, how was I to know she was allergic to garlic? Garlic's good for you. I use it in everything. But then she told me she was gluten-free too, and I caught her eating a Danish. Oh, and she's messy. She came for a visit that once, a long time ago. Stayed for 6 weeks, drove me crazy, Jeff too. I spent my time picking up after her. Now, Jeff is untidy, but he's not messy. It's no wonder she fell down the stairs. She probably tripped on something she'd left lying around. Still, Jeff's her only blood relative. Her husband died 10 years ago now, and no kids, and that's a good thing if you ask me. Oh, I wouldn't say that to Jeff. He's very loyal. He treats her like a baby sister. Even calls her babe sometimes. She's no babe, believe me. Once he even called me babe. Took me off guard, but I warned him if he ever called me that again, he would be dubbed Lammy Pie forever after. Passed the morning in the kitchen, preparing Jeff's favorite meal. Spent hours at it, marathon workout. And the table's already set. I went all out. Silver cutlery, best china, crystal glassware, cloth napkins, candles, and his favorite wine. It'll be a date. First time I won't have eaten alone in over 5 weeks. I'll even spruce up a bit. Jeff says I'm a sartorial disaster, a fashion mistake. He's always handing me a comb or sending me back upstairs to change a shirt or my pants or even my socks. Should be home in a couple of hours. Jeff didn't get home the other night. He had to cancel his flight. She died, his sister, just when he thought she was pulling through. I told him I was sorry. I don't think he believed me. But I was sorry. Am sorry for him, not for her, his late sister. I love that expression, late. She was always late. I don't think she was ever early or on time for that matter. Still, It's sad to lose a sibling, your only sibling. I know, my sister died young. It's why my niece came to live with us that time. Jeff's sister wasn't young, but I suppose that doesn't really matter. Been having indigestion lately. Been eating leftovers since Jeff didn't get home the other night. I shouldn't complain, it's delicious. Maybe a bit too rich. So, he'll be staying out west longer now. She's being cremated, but I suppose there'll be some sort of service at that dreadful church she goes to. I told him she should just scatter her ashes in the ocean, but then he reminded me what happened when we scattered my mom's ashes. I got the wind direction wrong. She ended up all over me, head to toe. She was even in my hiking boots for years after that. So he has to clear out her place, settle things. I thought she owned the townhouse, but it turns out it's rented, so he has to clear it out quickly. Look after her bills and her finances. Serves him right. He's terrible at finances. He said he'll book another flight out as soon as he can see the light of day. I know he's missing his painting. He didn't take his art supplies with him. Well, we thought it'd be a quick visit. Wouldn't have had much time for that out there anyway. He took up painting 10 years ago when he retired, spends hours at it. He says it relaxes him. Well, he studied art at college and he was good at it too, but it didn't pay the bills. Pays them now, though. He's gotten himself quite the reputation, even has a gallery in Ottawa that sells his work. We met when we were young, in our early 20s. He was studying art back then. I was studying theater and dance. Took us a while to realize that we were more than just best friends. But then sex education back in those days was not about making love. It was more about holding your nose and making babies. We're different. Are different. They say that makes a good team, and I think we have been a good team too. Two horses on the plow, as they say. He's the creative one. Me, I'm the pragmatist. I gave up on theater, in a theatrical sense, that is, when I was 26. No future. Anyway, I broke my leg in 3 places in a rehearsal and they said it wrong. I became a lawyer. A different kind of theater, really. A game. A boys' game. An old boys' game, especially back then. When I retired, I swore I would never wear a suit and tie again. Never go to a hairstylist, never golf or go to cocktail parties, and never say hereinafter or forthwith or under advisement. I think I've kept my promise. Still, we've stayed pretty active for 2 old guys. We've always liked to hike, a little less rigorously these days, and maybe not quite so often. I don't like to go hiking alone anyway. And we love to cycle. Well, used to anyway. Not so much these days. Somehow the hills seem higher and steeper than we think they should be, and the distances seem further than we remember. Even bending over to put on my slipper seems further than it used to. But I haven't been getting enough exercise since he's been away. But then my back's been acting up. Oh, the other day I went to this massage therapist. She told me I should be trying some traction, and she showed me how to hang from a door frame. I tried it out when I got home. The door frame started to pull away from the wall. I tried it outside the next time I was hanging up the laundry. I climbed up on this stepladder and hung from the upper deck. The ground was wobbly, and so was the ladder. There was a hill down there. Anyway, I managed to knock it over when I was hanging there. It was just a small stepladder. I mean, it was only a couple of feet off the ground. Trouble was, the kids who had been playing in the yard below looked up, and all they could see was my feet dangling there in this ladder on the ground beside. I didn't see them, but I sure heard them running off shrieking. Then I sprained my ankle when I dropped to the ground and fell over that blinking stepladder. Banged my forehead as I was rolling down the hill. Must have looked a real mess. Well, the next thing I know, the police are at the door, looking around, asking questions, giving me the third degree. Who do you live with? Where is he? How did you get that bump on your forehead? And what about those bruises? That sort of thing. The neighbors were out in the street, some of them in masks. Well, more excitement than they'd had since the pandemic. I saw old Mrs. Doyle looking very concerned. Now, she's a nice old girl. Lives just up the street. Probably younger than me. Her husband died a year ago. I didn't really know her until then, and just the neighborly wave, a smile, occasional hello. But I took her up a seafood casserole. Didn't know she was allergic to shrimp, but she was very gracious and said her family was coming over and they would enjoy it. I think the neighbors were disappointed there was no dead body, no yellow tape being stretched around the property, and no old guy being dragged off in handcuffs. Pretty sure the police were too. I thought it would be okay being alone for a while. And it was at first. I mean, I got used to that when Jeff was working, when I was working too. But it's different now that I'm retired. Being alone wears off soon enough. Well, then my niece called to see if Jeff got home. She calls a lot, especially when Jeff's not around. She thinks I don't take care of myself. Well, it didn't help that I was wincing a lot from the pain while I was standing there talking to her on the phone, the pain in my ankle. She told me I wasn't taking care of my needs. Trouble was, I thought she said I wasn't taking care of my knees. So I tried to explain to her that it wasn't my knees, it was my ankle. Well, the conversation got a bit confusing after that. I tried to explain to her why Jeff had to be away so long. She thinks he's staying away longer than he has to. As if a dying sister isn't reason enough. She asked me if the reason I seem down so much lately is because I'm worried Jeff is having an affair out there. But I think it's what she's been thinking. I hadn't even thought about it until then. Not that I'm proud of it. I did resist the temptation for a while, but after she put that idea in my head, I went through the drawers in his art studio. Didn't find anything, which made me even more suspicious. I mean, we all have something to hide. Anyway, I wouldn't blame him if he were. I've been edgy lately, tired more than usual, and well, this social distancing thing is really getting me down. Jeff says I'm depressed. He wants me to see a doctor. Now, why would I do that? They don't teach them bedside manners anymore, and they're usually so abrupt. Anyway, it's so often bad news. They just want to send you for all these tests and give you pills. I don't want to take pills. The one time I did, I got to be really cranky, and I found out it was a side effect. Imagine a pill to make you cranky. Well, it didn't say that exactly, but that was the gist of it. There's enough in this life to make you cranky. You don't need a pill for that. Anyway, who wants to spend hours sitting in a waiting room? Time's precious at my age. Jeff says it'll be several more weeks before I can even think about leaving. I was having trouble finding the will at first. He was looking for a formal document. Well, he found it, but it turned out it was a handwritten document, and it was in a suitcase in one of her closets. Poor guy. He's the executor, and it isn't easy dealing with a handwritten will, let me tell you. So it'll be taking him longer now. Well, maybe that's a good thing. I just discovered my ring was missing. Must have taken it off when I did that cleaning the other day. Put it in a safe place. I'd lost it once before. Trouble is, I can't remember where that safe place was. Oh, I'll remember soon enough, or it'll show up, I'm sure. He says he's contacted a gallery out west that's interested in his works. Well, good for him. Meanwhile, I'm just a house husband. Scullery maid, wash maid, cook, cleaner, gardener, well, and accountant. If Jeff were in charge of the finances, we'd be in trouble, let me tell you. It just isn't his forte. I took over soon after we got together. I was tired of coming home and finding the phone cut off, and all those nasty letters from the power company threatening to shut off the power, not to mention late payment charges. He laughed at me one day when I told him I was having trouble balancing the books. Well, he was concerned at first, asked me how much. It was only 10 cents, but I had to find it. It took a while, but I did. Jeff says I'm obsessive compulsive, only he says I'm OCD, and I hate acronyms. Always have. But they're everywhere these days. Everyone uses them. Every profession, law, government, you name it. Even my niece uses them. She's a social worker. They love them even more than lawyers do. Makes them feel important, like they have the inside scoop. So, when Jeff told me one day that the post person had delivered a parcel, I told him he had PCS. It took a while, but he asked me what I meant. So I told him he had politically correct syndrome. He wasn't very amused. Anyway, it gave me something to do, and I wrote that book about political correctness. It's meant to be funny, but I don't think people with PCS have much of a sense of humor. Well, I sent it off to a publisher a long while back now, on a whim, a guy I knew from my law days. He said he'd take a look at it. And I've been working on that other book too. Had trouble at first, writer's block, but I got on a roll again and it's nearly finished now. It's given me something to do while he's been away. Lawn's getting long. Haven't been able to cut it. Had to send the lawnmower out for repair. Wouldn't start. They said it would take a week or even longer. They're having trouble getting parts these days. Still haven't found my ring. I thought it would turn up by now, or I'd remember where it was. As I say, not much is turning up in that old memory bank these days. Jeff was supposed to be home yesterday. I heard a knock at the door. I assumed it was him. It was about the time he was supposed to be getting in. He's never remembering where the hidden key is, and he's always forgetting his own. Well, when I opened the door, there was this kid standing there, dutifully 6 feet back. I didn't know him, but I recognized him. A teenager. Lives up on the next street, I think. He said he was raising money for this conference he wants to attend. He asked me what I knew about climate change. Well, I told him all that I know about that. About the sudden swings in temperature, about places being damp where they shouldn't be and moist where they should be damp, about things growing where they haven't before and not growing where they have, about sudden eruptions, deeper furrows, stronger wind. Well, he did look at me kind of strangely. Wasn't quite the answer he was expecting, but he took it at face value. But I wasn't talking about planet Earth. I was talking about me. Still, he was pleased enough when I handed him a $100 bill. But Jeff didn't get home. I figured something had come up, or he had just missed the plane. I mean, he's not the most punctual of people, our Jeff. Now, I tried calling him at his sister's place, but the phone was cut off. I should have known it would be. And he didn't answer his cell phone either. Don't know why he has one. It's always turned off, out of power, or misplaced somewhere. Well, I didn't feel like wasting another good meal, and I was tired of eating alone. You're going to think I'm crazy. My niece, she already does. But I invited my teddy bear to dine with me. Usually stays upstairs in the guest room. I've had him since I was born. A christening gift from my godmother. A person I never knew. So he's an antique, like me, a bit worn, also like me. Jeff's sister made me take him out of the guest room when she was here that time. She said he was ratty. She should have talked. Anyway, it was someone to sit and look at and talk to. I even forgot it wasn't Jeff for a moment. The mind does strange things when you're alone a lot. The table set with all the finery. I put on a Strauss waltz, and I invited Teddy to dance with me. Well, Jeff and I dance sometimes, but he is a bit clumsy and hard to move around. But Teddy was light as air, and I got lost in the music. Didn't step on my feet the way Jeff sometimes does. Anyway, I didn't see my niece drive in. I saw her drive away, though. I was sure it was her car. It was dark. She didn't come in. I figured she'd seen me through the window, a crazy old guy dancing with a teddy bear. Oh God, I thought. Now she will think I've lost it for sure. Uncle Richard's in La La Land. Maybe I am, but I've come to understand why we old people like that land. It's a comfortable place to be. Well, then she called. I knew she would, ostensibly to see if Jeff got home. She was in her car, I could tell. I was having trouble hearing her at first. I guess she was on a cell phone, lousy reception. I kept asking her to repeat herself. I was getting frustrated. She said she was concerned I was going deaf. Suggested I get a hearing aid. Oh, why would I do that? I mean, a friend of mine got one recently. Cost him $5,000. $5,000. So when he told me that, I asked him what kind. He looked at me funny and then looked at his watch and said it was 12:30. 12:30. A waste of money, if you ask me. Anyway, I told my niece no, Jeff was not home. She gets this concerned voice on and asks me, how was I doing? Well, I knew where that was coming from, so I told her I was fine. She mothers me. One mother in a lifetime is enough. But she's well-intentioned. Jeff called the morning after he was supposed to have been home. Well, he sounded confused, upset. He said he'd lost his phone. He had to cancel his flight at the last minute. He'd received a call from the gallery out there, and they want to see him in person at the end of this week. A big deal, apparently. A big show. He said he tried to call. Somebody else's phone, I guess. But then we'd had that big storm and the power was out here for several days. No phone. It isn't easy dealing with the phone company when your phone's out of service. He said he'd book a flight out as soon as he can, maybe early next week. Should have let me know. Just doesn't think about these things. But then I guess he's had a lot on his mind lately. Well, my niece called, like clockwork. I wasn't going to answer the phone, but then I thought, oh, she's going to worry and she'll stop by. So I answered. Well, and I'm glad I did. At first, she was playing social worker, asking questions, the sort that are meant to test my mental state. I was getting annoyed. Finally, I worked up the courage to ask her why she keeps insinuating that Jeff is having an affair. She sputtered at that. And then she mentioned all the cancelled flights. Well, come on, there've been reasons enough for those. I could hear her take a deep breath, and then there was this awkward pause, and finally she said, well, she had stopped in just before Jeff left, and he was talking quietly on the phone in the front room, and before he noticed her, she heard him say, love you, Robbie. See you soon, babe. Something like that anyway. She wasn't sure of the exact words, but she said it sounded affectionate. And he got red in the face when he noticed her. Can't say I blame him. He hates it when she just appears unannounced like that. I started to laugh so hard I was almost gagging for breath. I almost had tears in my eyes. My poor niece thought I was crying. Well, I guess I was in a way, but not in the way she was thinking. You see, Jeff's sister's name is Roberta, but he calls her Robbie. And he calls her Babe sometimes too, even though she's older. Well, my poor niece, she was so embarrassed she didn't know what to say for once. But then, she'd never met Roberta. I mean, Roberta was only here that once, a long time ago. And Jeff and I have no reason to talk with my niece about his sister. I mean, why would we? So really, she had no reason to know Roberta's name. I wish I'd asked her that question a long time ago. It would have saved me a lot of anxiety. But then I suppose sometimes we're just too afraid of what the answer to our questions might be. Maybe I am depressed. Haven't been sleeping well lately. Aching more than usual. Still sore from that bloody fall. So I went back to the massage therapist the other day. Told her about the traction incident, the one with the police. She thought it was hilarious. I guess it was if you weren't the one who was humiliated. Anyway, she told me about these breathing exercises she's been doing recently. She said it stimulates the blood, which would help reduce the swelling, which was causing some of my pain. So I tried it out at home a couple of days ago with the aid of a YouTube video she'd told me about. So there I was, sitting on the floor like Buddha on a bad day, breathing in, out, in, out, in, out. I passed out, knocked my head on the coffee table. Fortunately, my niece came by. She was returning some books she'd borrowed. She found me, freaked out. There was blood on the floor, and she'd called the ambulance. Well, they wheeled me out. I didn't see, but you can be pretty sure the neighbors were out in the street enjoying the excitement. I had a concussion. They kept me in the hospital for several days for observation. I just got home the day before yesterday. Jeff was supposed to have been home yesterday. I just found a telephone message this morning. Must have come in a couple of days ago when I was in the hospital. It wasn't from Jeff, the message. It was from this guy, a friend of his sister, apparently. He said his name was Bob something or other, or maybe it was Todd. Anyway, he said that he had loaned Jeff a cabin out west, and he was still stuck out there. He had to loan him the cabin because Jeff had already vacated his sister's place, and he needed a place to stay, and it did sound like the sort of place that Jeff would enjoy, quiet, remote. I guess a good place to recover from all the stress of dealing with his sister's affairs and whatnot. Anyway, Jeff couldn't get across to the mainland in time because this storm had come up and the water taxi had been damaged. Jeff was supposed to be in Vancouver 3 days ago in time for his flight. So this guy said Jeff couldn't call apparently because there's no service on the island and not even any power in the cabin. He said he felt bad because unfortunately, his word, not mine, he hadn't warned Jeff about that before he went there. So he thought he'd better give me a call so I wouldn't worry. A bit late for that. He tells me that Jeff won't be back in the city in Vancouver now until tomorrow at the earliest. The joker didn't leave a callback number. I sure hope my niece won't call. My book got rejected. The spoof on political correctness. But I wasn't holding out much hope anyway. They warned me it would probably ruffle too many feathers. I should have known. He did apologize for taking so long to get back to me, though. And personally, he said he enjoyed it. He said it made him laugh. But it wasn't the right climate for laughing at political correctness these days. Pity the world. Anyway, I've been working on that new book. It's finished now. Feeling good about this one. It's politically correct. It's a murder mystery with a twist. There's no murder, that's the twist. Lots of intrigue, though. False assumptions, misleading clues, fiction with a sprinkling of fact. I sent it off to the same publisher a couple of weeks ago now by courier, and they got back to me quickly on this one. They like it. It's on their list for publication. Maybe even a book tour. Jeff was supposed to have been home 5 days ago. He called me to say the flight had been delayed a day. And then a couple of days later, he called to say it had been redirected to Ottawa. A freak wind and hailstorm in Toronto, apparently. He said he couldn't call because they'd made him check his hand luggage, and that's where his phone was, the new one. Typical. That's why I don't have a cell phone. You get to depend on them too much, and then when you need them, you can't find them, and you're going to need a landline anyway. He said he'd book another flight out in a day or two. He'd like to take advantage of being in Ottawa first and stop by the gallery there. Apparently they weren't open until yesterday. He says he'll hopes to book another flight out tomorrow. I won't hold my breath. I might pass out again. Jeff didn't get home. He's been in isolation in Ottawa for the past 2 weeks. There was COVID on his last flight. Oh, he's okay. It's me who's stressed. Well, they say things happen in threes. The three tenors, the three musketeers, the three stooges, the three witches of Condor, and, well, the three kings. 3 strikes and you're out. Of course, the Holy Trinity. I wonder if Roberta's angels come in threes. Where was I? Oh yes, my stress. I went back to that massage therapist. She told me about a simple exercise that would be good for my stress. Would help reduce my blood pressure too. Well, that's been running awfully high lately. The magic potion? Cold showers. She said you just reduce the water temperature gradually. She says it's invigorating, so, well, I thought I'd try it. I mean, nothing to lose, anything to avoid taking pills. I should never have left the bathroom window open, though. I thought I could stand it at first, just turning the tap gradually, getting used to it bit by bit. But then this stream of ice-cold water came out all of a sudden. Well, I screamed the cry of the banshees, then slipped on a bar of soap I'd dropped on the floor. Cried out again, terrible pain, I fell. Figured I'd buggered my hip, the one I'd had surgery on twice before. Well, old Mrs. Fraser, now she lives right next door, she was out in her garden and she heard the noise, so being ever vigilant, she dialed 911. You can be sure that the masked fan club was out on the street when the cavalcade of emergency response vehicles arrived. I'm sure I was in shock when they found me there, crumpled on the shower floor in all my faded glory with the icy water still streaming all over me. Can't have been a pretty sight. Well, Bill Donaldson, he lives right across the street. He let them in. Said he hoped I didn't mind, but he thought it better than them bashing the door in. He'd noticed me getting the hidden key from time to time. They kept me in the hospital for several days. I'd buggered the hip all right. Needs surgery. Can't do it now, maybe not for a long time. But they offered me pain pills. I didn't want to take pain pills. Makes my head fuzzy. It's fuzzy enough at the best of times. Anyway, because I wouldn't take the pain pills, they've assumed that I can live with the pain for a while. Well, I can't. I just don't want to take pain pills. Anyway, the lawn's been cut while I was in the hospital. Still couldn't cut it myself. They can't get those parts for the lawnmower. Well, old Mrs. Fraser got her grandson to do it for me. He lives up on the next street. He's that environmentalist kid who'd been by before. He did a pretty good job, too. He wouldn't take any money, but I offered him $20. Oh. Heartburn. I'd ruined a nice piece of chicken I'd prepared for Jeff, and when he didn't show that evening, I didn't want to eat, but I forgot to turn the oven off. Smoke detector went off. Well, the fire engines didn't come that time at least. I got to it soon enough. But I sure burnt the chicken. Still, I thought it would make a good stew, so I saved it. Trouble was, I ate some of it this evening. Probably why I have heartburn. Jeff's supposed to be home this evening. He's late, though. He should have been in Halifax 2 hours ago. Anyway, I'm sure he'll have eaten. But I have a nice bottle of wine on the ready. I thought we could celebrate his new gallery. Well, and my new book. I haven't told him about that yet. I wanted it to be a surprise. Oh, the gallery out west. Want him to come back out as soon as the gathering restrictions are lifted. Soon, probably. Maybe I'll go with him this time. Hate airports. Never liked long flights. Come to think of it, I hate gallery show openings too. But I don't like being alone even more. It'll be good to be in isolation together. It'll give us time to catch up. Oh, that heartburn. Oh, it's late. Way past my bedtime. Oh, but I'll sit here for a while longer. I'm sure he'll call from the airport. He should be in by now. Jeff got home. Thankfully, I found my ring before he got here. Just in time, too. He'd have been really upset with me if I'd lost it again. He got in late that night 2 weeks ago. His car had been at the airport so long it wouldn't start. I'd stayed up, but I fell asleep in the chair. Actually, I'd broken down and taken a bunch of pain pills, just over-the-counter ones. He woke me up. He had a strange look on his face. I thought I was dreaming. He said he thought I was dead until I snorted and opened my eyes. He was waving a bunch of flowers in my face. It was our anniversary. He got home in time for our anniversary. He remembered. our 50th. I forgot. Well, I remembered, but then I forgot to remember on the actual day. Actually, I wasn't convinced he'd be home anyway. I was beginning to think maybe my niece had been right all along. I should have asked him myself. It would have saved me a lot of pain. Oh, he's been talking to my niece, and that in itself is a miracle. He tells me that she has concerns about my mental state. She thinks I'm getting to be eccentric. I told him I took that as a compliment. She's told him about my hip. I'd asked her not to tell him. I didn't want to worry him with that show of his coming up. I tried to hide pain. It isn't easy hiding pain like this. He could see it on my face anyway. The surgeon says it could be a year before they can operate. Maybe more, who knows. Suppose, like the lawnmower, they may be having trouble getting parts. Anyway, so we're off to Havana. He's told the gallery out west he can't come out right now. They wanted to do a show at the end of this month or beginning of next. He told them they'll have to do it without him then. I don't think they were too happy. He's taking me to Havana for surgery on my hip. He says it's a gift for our anniversary, our 50th, but I really think it's a gift from his sister, although she didn't know it. She's left him everything, apparently. It's not a lot, he says, but it's enough for a few good trips. I don't really feel like traveling these days. With the pain, it's getting bad. Well, my niece says we're crazy to be going, but Jeff insists, and anyway, he'd already bought the tickets. So we're leaving in the morning. He says they can see me right away. Well, that's if the virus test comes back negative, which it should do. Imagine something you can't see running your life. I guess it always has, not the virus per se, but things we can't quite see. Jeff has connections down there. He spent way more time in Cuba than I have. I guess it's a benefit of his being self-employed. A good friend of his is a Cuban artist. He met him years ago. He lives in Spain now. His name's Jose. Well, it turns out Jose's brother is an orthopedic surgeon at the big hospital in Havana, and he's going to see me right away. His name is Dr. Angel Fuentes. Angel. That's A-N-G-E-L. An angel. Imagine. Roberta was right all along. An angel is going to look after me. He's going to take away my pain.